Okay, in our last podcast for today, we're going to talk about what your book refers to as the PIBOK method. PIBOK stands for the 6 elements of any communication that you need to think about intentionally before, while, and after you make the communication, before you write the memo, or give the speech, or deliver the PowerPoint, or however it is that you're communicating. The P in PIBOK stands for purpose. Before you even start to write, think of what your purpose is in writing or communicating. And sometimes this can be difficult because sometimes the purposes are not obvious, or sometimes there are more than one reason that you're doing something, more than one purpose for your communication. Sometimes the purpose is very obvious. You're going to communicate that the office will be closed tomorrow because of snow. You send out a message, a very brief message, the office is going to be closed tomorrow because of snow. Sometimes your purpose is to persuade somebody to do something, or to persuade a group of people to do something or believe something, to take some action or to hold some value. Sometimes your purpose is to communicate bad news. You're fired, or we've not done very well this quarter and we're going to have to make some serious adjustments to the way that we do things. Sometimes your purpose is to inspire people, to let them know that it's okay, to let them know that even though times are tough, we've got it under control. So you have all of these purposes, and sometimes more than one of them exists within the same message. But it's important that you understand why you're communicating. So that's the P of the PIBOK method. The second is audience. And audience is very closely related to purpose. Your audience are the people that you are communicating to. And once again, sometimes you're communicating to multiple people at the same time. Think of one of the greatest speeches in all of American history, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, which he gave in front of 200,000 people gathered around the Washington Mall, and it was televised around the world. Well, in that speech, Dr. King was appealing to civil rights advocates, to people he'd been working with, and he was trying to tell them that they needed to keep up the struggle. But he was also communicating with the opponents, the people who disagreed with him. To them, he was trying to communicate the message that you should believe in the civil rights struggle. You should change your mind. And then there was the world audience, the people who were watching him, people who were in France and England and Germany and Japan, watching on TV. And to them, he was saying, you need to pressure the United States government. You need to use your influence as part of the international community to help those of us in the United States who are struggling for civil rights. So you had 3 distinct purposes, 3 distinct audiences, and as a result, you had to craft a message that could serve simultaneously all 3 of those things. And we do this in business more often than you might think. Sometimes you're communicating to your boss. At the same time, you're communicating to a client. To the client, you're saying, we've produced your order and it's ready to pick up. To your boss, you're saying, I am competent, I've done what you asked me, and you probably got to think about giving me a raise. So don't just think of one purpose and one audience. Think of all of the different purposes and all of the different audiences that a given communication might have. Once you've determined who you're writing to and why you're writing, and even if that includes several different audiences and several different purposes, you need to decide what information you need to include in order to achieve the purposes that you've set out for your writing. Once again, you need to consider the fact that there may be more than one purpose and more than one audience. But once you do that, you want to minimize the amount of information you include. Don't include distracting or extraneous information. Everything that you include should be necessary and important to accomplishing the purpose that you've set out for the writing or the communication that you're effecting. It doesn't mean that you should not include what you need to include. Don't be short at the expense of completeness. You have to be complete. You don't want people having to call and ask you follow-up questions to something that they should have been able to get from the communication that you made. But make sure that you have just what is required, that you do not include a lot of extraneous information, because then people tend to miss what you want them to see. So the best way to make sure that people see what it is that you want them to see is not to put things there that might distract them from that. Then we come to the B. The B is something that is rooted deep within human nature, and that is the benefits. What can you do? What can you do in your communication to show how what you're trying to communicate will benefit the person who is receiving the communication? What's in it for them? People want to know if they support you in your idea, if they support the concept that you're bringing forward, it will help them in some way. People are basically self-interested. Without that, we wouldn't have economics as we know it today. People want to know what you can do for them, what your idea can do for them, how you can help them, how this can benefit something that's important to them. So make sure that you constantly think about your audience and think about what they're going to be expecting and what you can present to them as a benefit of whatever you're advocating in your communication. Okay, so we've taken care of the PIBE, now we've got to get to the OC. The OC stands for objections and context. First, think about what objections somebody might have. What objections would you have? If you read a message saying we are going to invest in a whole bunch of new materials from this supplier, somebody might think, well, that's going to cost too much. As you create the message, build in your response to those objections that you anticipate. Is this going to affect our relationship with other suppliers? Is this going to affect people's job security? As you think of how people might object to this, create your message in such a, this is part of knowing your audience, create your message in such a way that people can see that you're anticipating those objections, and then you already have answers. That way you don't have to have an argument. You've already pre-built the argument into what you're saying. Then think about the context. And the context is the larger set of situations in which the communication occurs. The context is who are you talking to? If I'm the boss and I'm talking to my employees, that gives a certain ethos to the way that I communicate, that if I'm a mailroom clerk talking to a bunch of shareholders, there's quite an opposite context involved. So think about how you relate to the people that you're communicating to, and also what's going on around them. I remember when we had, in 2008, a very serious recession, and Newman University had some financial issues that had to be addressed. That was the national situation, and when I, as a manager, brought in people to talk about some of the things that we had to do, we had that national context as a point of reference, and it made it a lot easier to say, we're going to have to cut out travel money right now, because if we don't, we could be in jeopardy of losing things that are much more important. So that's the PIBOK method. Think about why you're communicating. You may find that you don't have a good reason for communicating at all, in which case, do something else. Do something better with your time. Why are you communicating? Who are you talking to? What kind of information are you going to contribute? What kind of information content do you have to accomplish your purposes? What benefits can you offer people? What objections can you anticipate? And what is the context in which your communication occurs?